Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the world's most exciting classroom. My name is Joe Grabowski, and I'll be your host for today. This is a special one for a whole variety of reasons. This is our 87th world's most exciting classroom, geared towards classrooms in Canada, the US, the UK, and anywhere else who wants to tune in. We've done about 23, 24 events for classrooms in other parts of the world, like Australia and New Zealand, but this is definitely the longest running part of our program, the DARWIN200 and the world's most exciting classroom. This will be one of our final live events for a few reasons. Today, to the classrooms in Canada and the US who are joining us, it is very likely your last day of school. So thank you so much for joining us on your final day for one last event. We'll have maybe one or two more world's most exciting classrooms, but we are very close to the end of our journey. Let me share the screen really quickly here. It lets you see the map, and you can see exactly what I'm talking about. So that should be up on your screen now. If you ever want to visit this map, darwin200.com, you can check it out there. We are on our last stop of this incredible journey following Darwin's Voyage of the Beagle on board the Oosterschelde. You can see back in August 2023, we left Plymouth. And if we back out even more, we have been sailing all around this incredible planet. And here we are in the Azores. This is our final stop. I believe our last group of Darwin leaders will come on board the ship next week. And then it is off to Falmouth, where we'll be arriving mid-July. And hopefully we'll be able to do maybe a cool live stream from the ship, either in Falmouth or maybe in London. So that is where we are right now. And the crew is on board, or not on board, but they are on land on the island of Terceira. And we haven't been able to catch up with them for a few weeks because our Starlink units are toast. We lost one just as we left Cape Town, and the second one went just as we were approaching St. Helena. So I'm really excited to have this chance to catch up. Let's get that going right now, and let's bring in a familiar face in Josh from backstage. Hey, Josh, how you doing?
Hello, I'm good. How are you guys?
Good. Great to have you with us. And then we've got Mariana, who we've talked about a few times, our Explorers Club researcher. How are you doing, Mariana? All right. So we didn't hear you very well, but we're going to get Josh to exchange the headset with you when it's time to learn a little bit more. But Josh, let's get started. Last time we saw each other was Cape Town. Last time we had you on the ship was Cape Town as well. Since then, St. Helena, Ascension, two incredible spots. Can you tell us a bit about your time in both those islands?
Yeah, really, really nice places. Very, very strange places, in a good way, very different to a lot of places we've been already. St. Helena, very, very quiet little island. Jamestown is a really small town with only a handful of sort of restaurants and one pub, which we managed to find. But a beautiful island, an incredible range of landscapes. Sort of around the outside of the island, it's very, very brown, volcanic rock, and then you almost cross a ridge into the center of the island, and it looks like the English countryside. It's green and lush, really, really nice. And yeah, we picked up three St. Helenian Darwin leaders from there, and then sailed with them and Stuart to Ascension. And Ascension, again, really amazing, very peculiar place. It's mostly a military base. So we had to pull a load of strings and jump through a load of hoops to even be allowed to go there. But I'm really, really happy that we did end up going there. We saw some great stuff. We saw they've got a huge, huge nesting green turtle population there. And we were lucky enough to go out at night and see an adult turtle laying eggs in the nest, and then we went first thing in the morning and we saw some turtles hatching from under the sand and making their way to the ocean, some much more successfully than others. But yeah, they're really, really, really cool places that I never thought I'd get to see. And yeah, I didn't know what to expect, but I was really pleasantly surprised by both of them.
Yeah, a couple of weeks ago, Josh, we had Stu join us from Ascension right the day after maybe the ship had left. And we shared some of those sea turtle videos, and just absolutely incredible, from the laying of the eggs in the nest to the hatching to that gauntlet of frigate birds that they have to run. That the footage is just amazing of, this little trail of sea turtles and pick pick,
Yeah.
and then those lucky few make it to the water. But we talk to students about that. I mean, that's nature, and those frigate birds have to feed their young. And
Yeah, and what a lot of people don't understand is the turtle numbers on Ascension are doing great, whereas the Ascension frigate bird numbers are actually declining. So if anything, we need to encourage the frigate birds to eat more turtles so that they can be more successful.
all right. Well, we'll pitch that to classrooms and see what they think.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, you sent me, because you're obviously in Azores now. You're in Terceira, which is a beautiful island. I was lucky enough to visit a couple years ago. Let's take a look at this little clip of the arrival to Terceira. Let's see, where did I put it? There it is. Here we go. All right. Very cool. That brings back some memories. Along that rock wall, I did a lot of diving. There's a group of 2 islands kind of further out where there's some good diving. And I know you guys are going to go on the weekend. You are going to see so many octopus. There are.
Awesome.
It is an octopus-rich environment. They tried to steal my GoPro on numerous occasions.
Oh, wow.
I think you're going to have some fun doing some diving.
Great.
It's beautiful.
That sounds really good.
Yeah, very cool. Josh, why don't we pass the mic to Mariana for a couple minutes? We'd love to talk to her for a minute.
Yeah, we'll do.
Hi, can you guys hear me?
There we go, Mariana. We've got you now.
Yeah. Okay, perfect.
Yeah, well, you have one of the longest research legs on the journey, which is pretty awesome. Why don't you introduce yourself and tell us a bit about what you're up to on the ship?
Yeah, for sure. So, hi everyone, my name is Mariana. I'm from Colombia. I was very lucky to be able to be part of this program and be able to join the ship and experience the living there and get to do some research, which is why I'm there. I am collecting some eDNA samples. To those who don't know what eDNA is environmental DNA. So it's all the DNA that is left behind by all animals or every living organism in the environment. So I can later collect it and analyze it and see what has been passing through those waters, which is pretty cool. And it's very interesting because it's like a very unique opportunity, like it's not often that someone gets to jump on a ship and be able to sail across the world, like gathering these sort of samples. So it's super interesting for science to see what results we get, and yeah, super exciting.
All right, very cool, Mariana. And you're using we've been collecting eDNA on the ship, but we've been doing it with a bucket. So dropping a bucket into the water and collecting samples. But you're going much deeper. Can you tell us a bit about how you're doing it and what you're hoping to find?
Yeah, for sure. So it is a bit different because I am using these devices that are able to go 200 meters down in the ocean, which is pretty cool. Like being able to extract DNA so deep is not that easy, and we managed to be able to get the instruments to do this and to test this. So it's been quite a journey to figure out how to collect it. It takes a group of 6 people to for the operation to be successful. So one of us is just telling the captain where he needs to point the ship towards, so the rope is like on the right direction. Then, so I'm gonna go backwards a little bit. Like the puffer fish is just like hanging a little bit out on a dovet, um, and it's tied to a rope. So the rope just goes down by the by the side of the boat, and it needs to be as straight as possible. So that person is in charge of telling the captain how straight is the rope, if he needs to reverse, go forward. um, Another person then later, to get it out, we need 5 people, because one needs to pull, the other one needs to coil the rope, the other one needs to twist the roll where we are coiling the rope. It's like a bunch of stuff happening, and getting out the instrument, which is called a pufferfish, getting the sample. So it's a lot going on, and it requires a lot of hands for it to happen successfully, which I am very glad I've gotten all the help on board that I've needed.
Yeah, I think, Mariana, it was your first time using that puffer fish, that pump in the field. So did you know kind of what to expect, or has this whole thing just been an adventure trying to figure out how to get those samples from so deep?
Yeah, so absolutely my first time using them. It's been a complete adventure, because I had no idea how it was gonna turn out. The procedure, I've also had no idea how to make it work as smoothly as possible, even like on the ship, because it's not a research vessel. So it's been also a challenge to make it happen, um, and make like the research easily happen on the boat.
Yeah.
So it's been a challenge for sure. Like on the first leg from Cape Town to Saint Helena, the samples it was hard. Like, it has been improvements. Like the first samples, we just threw the pufferfish with the rope on the side, and somehow with a rubber mat tried for the rope not to like rub off the paint of the boat. And then we were not even coiling the rope up, because it's a lot of rope. Imagine 200 meters of rope. We
Yeah.
were just putting it in a bag, but then that's a lot of rope getting tangled. So it has evolved, and then we've come with the solution of using the davit, so the rope is like pushed out of the ship, and then we've got a coiler, so the rope is now nicely coiled. It's like evolved so nicely.
Well, it's a great crew on board the ship of the Oosterschelde, so I'm thrilled they've been able to help out. The places you've been able to visit, from Cape Town to St. Helena to Ascension to the Azores, I know work like this hasn't been done before. So it's very exciting that we're able to collect this science. And yeah, it must be fun for you to have this experience too. I'm sure it's unlike
Yeah.
anything you've ever done.
Yeah, totally, completely. And it's very exciting as well. Like, not only because of the science, but also being able to see these places. It's amazing.
All right. Well, before we let you guys go, I'm just going to check the chat. If you are tuning in from a classroom and you have any questions for Josh or Mariana about the Darwin 200, about kind of the time sailing, Cape Town Ascension, or St. Helena Ascension, now the Azores, or any questions about the science, we'll take a minute or two to see if there's any questions. Then we're going to jump to our next guest, who's waiting for us in Africa, in Zambia. So we're excited for that. So while we wait to see if a question or two comes in, Mariana, what's the next few days look like? What are you guys up to for the next few days?
We are exploring Terceira, and then we will be going out to Fayal, our last island in the Azores. And then hopefully I will get to do some more sampling there in Fayal.
All right, fingers crossed. We have a couple ideas to make that happen, so I hope it all works out. And then Josh, I guess Josh is right on until the UK, so hopefully I'll see you in Falmouth and then London. Oh, I think she passed you the wrong one. It doesn't have the mic.
Oh,
There we go. I was just saying, Josh, we'll see you probably in Falmouth and maybe London as well. All right, excellent. Well, I think at this stage, we'll let the two of you go. I'm sure it looks like a beautiful sunny day. I'm sure you have lots to get up to. Have fun with your diving and keep me in the loop. I'd love to know how the last bit of research goes if you're able to get those samples.
yeah, for sure.
All right.
Awesome. Great. Thanks a lot, Joe.
Thanks, Josh.
You,
Thanks,
Joe.
Mariana. Great to have you both
Bye.
with
Yeah.
us. See ya. Okay, very cool. It's been a few weeks since we've been able to have that live connection. It was hard because almost 2 years of the journey, we could connect with the ship whenever we wanted. The only kind of limitation sometimes was if we were on the other side of the planet, they'd be asleep. So we'd have them join us live with classrooms in Australia or New Zealand or Indonesia, places like that. So it is nice to have that reconnection before they set sail on the last leg of the journey, which should relatively short, maybe 2 weeks tops. And then mid-July, they will be back in Falmouth, where Darwin finished his voyage of the Beagle, his 5-year journey, a journey that we're doing in 2 years for multiple reasons, time and technology and things like that. We can do it just a little bit faster. Okay, so as mentioned, we are going to get to a guest speaker out in the field. This is pretty much my favorite thing about the world's most exciting classroom is we do have the ship connections, but every week we try to go somewhere in the field, somewhere in the world. And today we're going to spend a little time with my friend Joe Cutler. He's leading a river expedition on the relatively unexplored Kabompo River in Zambia. So he's out in the field. He's joined us a few times from the field, once at the start of the expedition. Last week, he joined us again for an update on what they've been up to, the biodiversity they've seen, how the river has been. And today we're going to have another one of those catch-ups. So Joe's an ichthyologist, a freshwater ecologist, and an African river explorer. He's a National Geographic explorer as well. He studied volcanic lakes in Cameroon. He's done massive mega transect of Gabon's Ogooue River, which is one of Africa's last wild rivers. And now he is getting out into the field with the Wilderness Project and surveying amazing rivers in places like Zambezi, the Congo, Angola. Pretty darn cool. So let's get Joe from backstage with us. Hey, Joe, how you doing?
Hey, Joe. I'm doing great. It's great to join you.
Yeah, it's great to have you with us again. It looks like sunset. The sun might be starting to go down there, so I imagine you're set up for camp and ready for a night.
Exactly. So you can see the camp here behind me. I've got my tent tucked a little ways off in the bush. And we had a good day on the river. We paddled 40 kilometers and passed the town of Kabompo. So the town that carries the river's name. And it was pretty busy. A lot of human activity on the river. And we're actually getting pretty close to the Zambia now. So within the next week, we will complete this transect. It'll be a first source to confluence transect of the Kabompo River, and a massive contribution to the scientific understanding of the system. So even though we're a little tired, 3 weeks in the bush will wear on you. We're all feeling good and excited to kind of wrap it all up.
Awesome, Joe. I've got a bunch of pictures that you shared in the WhatsApp group, so we're going to pop up some of those photos. I don't think they're in any, I tried to put them in some semblance of an order, so we might be jumping around a little bit. So why don't we just get into some of those and we can talk a little bit about what the next week might hold.
Sounds great.
All right, perfect. I am going to share my screen and I'm going to pick our window and we're going to get a look at the river here. So it looks like a little bit of rapids here in your canoes.
Whew. Yeah, we've had some rapids. Even today we had some unexpected rapids that were much more significant than we thought. And as we were approaching them, you could just hear the water roaring ahead. And thankfully, we stopped just at the right time so we could pull our canoes to the left bank and walk down alongside the rocks and figure out that it wasn't safe to paddle. And we were able to rope our boats down safely through the hairiest part of the rapid and relaunch downstream. from here on out, it looks like we're going to have pretty smooth sailing. But we've had a lot of big rapids on this trip, and navigating them in canoes with expensive research equipment is always a bit nerve-wracking. So thankfully, we've only had one capsize on this trip and no major equipment lost.
I hope it wasn't hippo related, because I know when you were in Angola, you guys had quite the hippo encounter.
Yeah, actually, we had a pretty intense hippo encounter this week as well. We were paddling down toward the confluence with the West Lunga River and the Kabompo, and as we're approaching, we hear this motorboat zipping up the river, and they shout at us, "There's an aggressive group of hippos downstream. They've just hit 2 canoes." And so, here we are. We've got to paddle past these hippos, and that's one of our intensive research sites. So as we're approaching, the heads of the hippos start popping up in the middle of the river. It turned out to be a pod of 8 hippos, and they weren't going anywhere. So we were lucky to be able to kind of skirt our way around those hippos and get past them safely. And every time you get past a pod of hippos safely, you feel good. In my almost 8,000 kilometers paddling in Africa, I've only been hit twice by hippos, but twice is 2 times too many. So you always try to avoid that.
Yeah, I've got a drone shot up now of the hippo, one hippo putting its head up out of the water, and you can see how they can disappear so easily in that green, murky water.
Exactly. And oftentimes you don't know where they are until you are right on top of them. And that's what happened to us in Angola. We were just cruising along, business as usual, and suddenly I see this brown mass come erupting out of the water right next to my canoe, and it hit my canoe and then hit 2 other canoes and tried to bite one of them. So that was my hairiest hippo experience to date. And fingers crossed it'll be my last scary hippo experience.
All right, we support you in that, Joe. And it looks like you've been getting some successful sampling going as well.
Yeah, so for me, I'm just in love with fish. It's why I do what I do. I paddle these rivers, I endure the difficulties and the discomfort, all for the opportunity to sample fishes. And we had the chance to use this really cool bit of equipment called a backpack electrofisher, which you can see in this image. And we were able to sample this waterfall and rapids area and collect 23 species of fish, at least 2 or 3 of which are new for science. So really awesome to get to bring out the modern equipment and incorporate that into our exploration that we're doing out here. It is really incredible how many fish live in these habitats, and you really don't know until you can fish with one of these techniques. So it is just a joy. It's so much fun to explore these rivers with a backpack electrofisher on.
All right. And so, yeah, you were just talking about the camp in behind you. So here's an example of one of those camps. This looks like maybe a breakdown of camp.
Yeah. So every day we break down camp and we set camp and we move all of our equipment. So we've got 5 canoes fully loaded to the gills with all of our stuff, all the food, all the camping equipment, all the personnel, all the research kit. And every single day you've got to load and offload those boats and pitch your tent and break down your tent. And a couple days ago I popped a hole in my air mattress, so now I'm sleeping on the. But after 3 months of sleeping on the floor, I don't really care anymore. I'm so tired at the end of the day that I could sleep anywhere.
All right, that's fair. And this looks like maybe getting ready, a little reflection before you guys get out on the river.
Yeah, every day before we start the paddle, we start with a prayer. And a lot of my team members are strongly religious, and that's what you're seeing here in this photograph. Actually, this is a community leader, a chief, who's offered to give us the prayer before we head downstream. And it's always nice when we can involve the local community in our work and especially get their blessings for the team, because it is dangerous work. Every day we take risks that could result in injury or worse. So it's important to get all the help you can as you move down these rivers.
Absolutely. And here we go, getting onto those rivers. Joe, what's that behind you? That looks like a new device.
Yeah, so that is an ADCP, Acoustic Doppler Current Profiler. And that is just about the most expensive piece of science equipment I've ever used in my life. It is like this incredible, almost like a sonar setup. And it is measuring the depth of the river, but also the velocity of the water. And it allows us to understand how much water is flowing out of these rivers. Now, for a river like the Kabompo that's relatively poorly studied, we don't really know where the water comes from in this system. So we use this machine to measure every time a river's entering the Kabompo. We'll then measure the tributary as well, and that allows us to calculate percent contribution of those different rivers to the Kabompo. Surprisingly, actually, a couple days ago at that West Lunga site with all the hippos, we actually found that more water was flowing out of the West Lunga than out of the Kabompo. So, at least in this season, in this year, the West Lunga seems to be a more significant contributor to the overall flow of the Kabompo. And this is really important for this river system because the Kabompo is one of the most important tributaries of the Zambezi. When it reaches the Zambezi, it contributes about a quarter of the water for the Zambezi River, which is a lot of water when you think about, how big the Zambezi is. It's one of Africa's and one of the world's great river systems. So for the Kabompo to be contributing a quarter of that flow, it's a really important system, and that's why we want to study this river.
All right. Well, let's zip through a few more pictures out on the water. There's a nice drone shot of you. Is that the full crew? 5 canoes? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5?
That's the full crew. We've swapped team members a few different times. Actually, right now we've got a couple representatives from the Zambian Department of Fisheries who have just joined us, and they're going to stay with us for a few days. But we always like to have the flexibility to incorporate different team members as we go downstream, people who have different interests. As we went through the West Lunga National Park, we had rangers with us. And now as we're getting into the more heavily populated areas and the more heavily fished areas, we've got representatives from the Department of Fisheries. And it's really great to be able to share this adventure and the access to these really remote areas. There's no way to get here other than by boat, and there aren't very many boats going down this river. So beautiful paddling. It's been spectacular. It's been one of the more beautiful rivers I've ever paddled in Africa. So anybody looking to set up a paddling adventure, I would highly recommend the Kabompo.
All right. And these next couple of pictures, Joe, are a little more science.
Yeah, so in this image right now, we're using a depth sonde. So the Kabompo is, at least according to Wikipedia, the second deepest river in Africa. Somewhere, someone said that there was a spot in the river that was 113 meters deep. That's over 300 feet deep. So every time we get to a spot that seems like it could be deep, we're measuring the depth just to check. And if we find a deep spot, then we're going to bring out that ADCP for a full measurement of the river. Up to date, the deepest spot we've seen is 12 meters. So a far cry from 113, but who knows? Maybe over the next few days, we'll find a super deep hole and we'll find that the Kabompo is truly the second deepest river in Africa. I'm not holding my breath, but I would be thrilled to find it.
All right. This looks like maybe some water sampling.
Actually, this is eDNA. So your past guest about this as well. So we're also doing environmental DNA work. And it's a really valuable technique because, pretty much anybody can do it. And it is comprehensive. Everything living in the river, everything interacting with the river is shedding DNA. And so we're filtering water samples through a very fine filter. And that allows us to look at the biodiversity of the river. And we are complementing our environmental DNA sampling with our fish sampling so that we can build a reference library so that anyone else who's studying these river systems, they don't need to catch fish anymore. They can simply see the eDNA of the river and know what's living there. So we're setting a really important baseline that can be used by future scientists to monitor these rivers and assess the diversity and the river health. So eDNA is not the most enjoyable data collection, but it might be the most powerful.
All right. And then, of course, you're catching some good wildlife. This looks like a pretty cool snake.
Yeah, that's a puff adder. So it's
Ah.
a cool snake and also a pretty venomous snake. And there's kind of a funny story about this one. You know, we've got our 5 boats and we've got a couple people with cameras. And, you know, the guy who took this shot was upstream of the snake. The other photographer was right next to the snake, and the snake swam right up beside his boat and then coiled as if it was ready to strike. And everybody in that canoe is tilting to the side, hoping that they don't get bit by this puff adder. I mean, that would be a, you know, potentially fatal snake bite. And to have them swimming across the river at your boat is a bit nerve-wracking. So we all had a good laugh after we got away from that snake safely.
So, Joe, there's a question in the chat about interactions, you know, with the local population, and I think this picture might be maybe a fisherman or someone in their little canoe. So, how's that been going?
You know, it's been interesting. Most of the Kabompo is very sparsely populated. You know, the first 2 weeks of our expedition, we saw almost no one on the river, and that's in part because there's a lot of rapids and the big national park. After we've left the national park, it's become a lot more populated. And so we've had the chance to stay in some villages and interact with local chiefs and traditional leaders. Generally, I can't rave enough about the warmth and hospitality of our Zambian colleagues. We can show up as strangers in the community and be welcomed as though we are long lost family. We have had nothing but warm welcomes and encouragement and support from our community members. And for me, it's always one of the best parts of the expeditions is getting the chance to meet with and learn from local fishermen and community leaders. And so, you know, a guy like this who's been fishing the Kabompo River his whole life, he knows more about that river and about the fish in that river than I ever will. I might be a PhD ichthyologist with a lot of experience on African rivers, but a local fisherman knows that system perfectly. Take the time to discuss and ask as many questions as I can, because there's always more to learn as you go down these river systems.
Okay. And so we can't leave off these photos without getting into some fish. So I have a couple of fish photos to end us off here.
Yeah. Thank you, Joe. You know I love the fish. So these are this is one of the fish that we caught in those rapids that we were electrofishing. And it is a type of catfish. It's in the aquarium trade, it's called an upside down catfish or a cuckoo catfish. And they are synodontis. And you can see those branched mandibular barbels that it's got. That is one of the characteristics that's really unique about these fish. They also have really crazy spines that are venomous and serrated. So if you poke one, or if you are poked by one of these fish, it can really be painful. And the diversity of these synodontis catfish in the upper Zambezi is really incredible. And it's probably a lot more than we know. So I'm assuming that over the next decade or so, there are going to be a lot of new species described from the collections we're making and from the collections other people are making. But they are really spectacular fishes, very cool fish. They make this funny sound. They go, whack, 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 whack. And they're not making that sound with their mouth or their vocal cords. They're actually grinding the spines in their sockets. And that's how they make the sound, which gives them one of their other names, which is the squeaker catfishes.
Okay. And then this looks like maybe some collection of samples for DNA, maybe?
Exactly. So this is me collecting a fin clip from another species of catfish, a butter catfish. And these ones actually have terrible venom. When you get stung by one of these things, it feels like a bee sting. But but they're really interesting open water fishes. They swim out in the open water. They're not like most catfishes that sit on the bottom. And every species that we collect at every site, we take DNA samples of. And this is to allow us to build out that reference library for our environmental DNA work. So we're building probably the most comprehensive library of freshwater fish DNA sequences and specimen ever collected from the Zambezi Okavango system. So it's really exciting work. I'm very excited to see what we can do with the publications and sharing this data with the scientific community. I think people are going to be flabbergasted with how many fish and how many samples we've collected and our coverage of the basin, because we're not just studying one river. We're studying all the major tributaries of the Zambezi. So we can look at variation within the basin, across the basin, different tributaries, different rivers. It's going to be a really cool data set. I'm very, very excited as a scientist.
All right. Well, let's come back here from that screen share. Let's get you front and center again, Joe. It is amazing. It's, there's these rivers really are all connected through their tributaries. So if you just look at one, you're just looking at one small chapter. So you have to get all of them to put them together to get that whole book of the river.
Exactly. And one of my dreams is, in 5 years, once we've done everything in the Zambezi Basin, that we can write the comprehensive book, Fishes of the Zambezi, that would be, more complete than anything that's ever been done. And, that's kind of pushing the boundaries of science and exploration. And it's really just a thrill for me as a scientist to be able to also put on my explorer's cap and go into some of these understudied areas and, perhaps be the first scientist to sample some of these areas, the first scientist to see some of these species of fish. It's really a joy. And, despite the exhaustion and the discomfort, I'm really grateful for the job I've got right now.
Okay. Well, Joe, we've got you for a couple more minutes. So those who are tuning in, don't be shy to send in a couple questions via the chat. But Joe, what do you think the next week is going to look like as you make your way down the last part of the river?
So, the Kabompo now is big. It's a big river. And, we are just cruising. We might have a couple other spots with some smaller rapids, but I think we're going to be just covering ground. The river is pretty busy right now. So on both banks, we're seeing a lot of farming, a lot of vegetable farming actually is kind of the primary activity, and a lot of fishing pressure. So we're going to be seeing a lot of people and a lot of fishing nets and a lot of farms and a lot of cows. I think within the next week, we're going to make it all the way to the confluence with the Zambezi, where we're going to do a lot of research. We want to understand how this river and its contribution of water affects the Zambezi downstream. In 2023, I had the chance to survey the upper Zambezi, doing the same type of work. And we found that that when the Kabompo entered the Zambezi, the salinity of the Zambezi increased tenfold. So it was at 0.01, and after the Kabompo entered, it was at 0.1 parts per thousand. So the Kabompo is geologically distinct. It is a major contribution of water, and it is, affecting the Zambezi River downstream. So we are kind of filling in the gaps of knowledge and answering some of the questions that we flagged back in 2023. So it's really exciting. And when we finally finish, we're going to have a big cheer and a celebration. We'll take a photo with the Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants flag, and we'll hit the road. We've got a long drive. We're going to end in the middle of nowhere. There's not a town at the confluence, so we're going to have at least a 2-day drive to get back to Lusaka, the capital city of Zambia, and then I'm getting on a plane a couple days later to go to one of the big fish conferences to go and tell the world about all the great fish we've catching out here and scientific operations around the work we're doing. So very excited to, continue looking forward to the end of the journey and a good shower and a nice warm bed. And then looking forward to sharing this information with the scientific community and really digging into the science of it all.
Okay, Joe. So a couple questions from the chat. The first week we connected, there's a question mark around hippos and crocodiles. So we definitely know you saw hippos. Have you had any encounters with any crocodiles? Or what about any other iconic,
We've
African
seen 12
wildlife along the
hippos,
river?
exactly 12 hippos. We had the group of 8, another group of 3, and a single individual inside the national park. Crocodiles have been much more abundant and more common. I actually have lost track of the number of crocodiles we've seen. We saw our biggest crocodile today. It was a pretty beefy one sitting on a log. But we've had no scary encounters with them. They seem fairly skittish on this river. And, we've probably seen a dozen or 2 dozen crocodiles, but the biggest one we've seen was about 3.5 meters long. So that's a 10-foot crocodile, but that's not a monster. I've seen 6-meter crocodiles, which are, almost 20 feet long. So, compared to some of the other rivers I've studied, the wildlife has been a little less scary on the Kabompo than some of the other rivers I've surveyed. That said, every time there's a community, they build a crocodile exclusion fence around their bathing area. So they build a fence into the river to protect themselves when they're fetching water and bathing in the stream. And that's a good sign that there are man-eating crocodiles in the Kabompo River. And I hope to keep avoiding those ones.
That's fair enough. What about other wildlife, Joe? Thinking maybe typical African wildlife along the river. Have you seen any elephants or leopards or, anything else that students might recognize?
Interestingly, so we paddled through a large part of the river went through West Lunga National Park, but there was very little wildlife inside of that national park. We've seen a few impala. We've seen some monkeys, both vervet monkeys and colobus monkeys, and we've seen signs of animals. So we've seen a lot of hippo tracks, a lot of elephant tracks and dung, but very little wildlife. And that's because West Lunga National Park was very heavily poached in the past. So, in the 90s, there was a huge poaching crisis, and almost all the wildlife in West Lunga National Park was extirpated by poaching. And this included rhinos and elephants and lions and leopards. So the Kabompo River is not a river with a lot of wildlife remaining. We have seen a lot of otters. We have seen a lot of monitor lizards, but generally speaking, not very much wildlife as compared to some of the other rivers that I've surveyed in the past.
All right. Well, 2 weeks ago when we connected, you were battling sweat bees. So this question here is, how are the biting insects?
It's cold season right now, so they're not that bad. I actually did spray myself down with mosquito repellent before taking this call because I didn't want to be slapping myself throughout the call. But they haven't been that bad. The one thing that's really annoying, any scratch you get, you are just coated in these flies. And the flies are everywhere, and they get onto your cuts and they bite your little cuts, and then you get infections. So right now I'm treating a bunch of small infections on my hands and feet and legs, just from the nicks and scratches and mosquito bites that then get chowed by the flies and get infected. So looking forward to being able to treat some of those wounds once we're off the river. But all things considered, relative to some of the other rivers I've surveyed, the bugs haven't been too bad.
All right, that's good. Last question for you, Joe. 2 weeks into the expedition, what are you eating out on the river?
Boy, we are eating like kings. I must say, our team is cooking for us well. So, we are eating rice and beans as our primary meal, but we've got potatoes, we've got butternut squash, we've got sweet potatoes, we've got some dry meat, which is a nice treat, and every now and again we can catch a fish that we eat for dinner. So we're eating well. Oats in the morning, I've eaten probably, 10 kilos of oats on this trip. But you know, as long as you can drown your oats in enough peanut butter and honey, it's not too bad. So I'm looking forward to a big steak when I get off the river, but that's not too far down the road at this point.
All right. You're right, Joe. 1 week to go. You have been in the field for quite some time, though, because before that, you had that big expedition you were leading in Angola. So I bet you were looking forward to hitting that conference and then getting back to California for a bit.
Yeah. I've been in the field for almost 4 months straight. And over that time, I've paddled almost 2,000 kilometers, and I've had some pretty hectic situations. So I'm tired. I'm worn down, and I am very much looking forward to the comforts of home, seeing friends and family, and recovering a little bit before I head off to the Democratic Republic of Congo for my next transect. So that'll be my first time in the Congo, and I'm just so excited to see all the fish because they're all going to be new for me. So
Yeah.
it's really exciting to get to go explore a new river system and a new country. So I'm going to definitely recover and be ready to get back into the field soon thereafter.
Perfect. Well, I hope you have a Starlink with you in the DRC, because we would absolutely love to connect with you there in the new school year. Joe, thank you so much for the last few weeks for taking us with you out on this expedition. And I hope the last week goes really well for you.
Thanks so much, Joe. And thanks to everybody tuning in. It's really amazing to be able to be out here, but more amazing to be able to share it with people all around the world. So thanks for tuning in. It's really great to share this opportunity and my passion for African rivers and the fish that live in them.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Joe. We'll connect soon. Definitely let me know how the last week goes. Thanks, Joe.
Will do. Thanks all.
All right. Very cool. So I'm here in Canada. We've already bounced to Africa. We were then up in the Azores, which is part of Portugal. So we've definitely covered a lot of ground here virtually in our world's most exciting classroom today. So we have a few more things to do before we wrap up, and that includes our experiment, and that includes our curiosity of the week. So a couple weeks ago, we had the Grow Your Own Geode experiment. That was our experiment from a couple of weeks ago. And let's take a look right now at those results. I'm going to pull it up here. Oops, I got to stop that old screen share so we can start a brand new one. Let's take a look at the results from our Grow Your Own Geode experiment from 2 weeks ago.
Welcome back, everyone. How did you get on growing crystals to make your very own geode? Well, I have to start this results session by saying I tried this experiment a couple of times and learned quite a great deal while I was doing it. I just bought alum online, and at first it didn't work. This was alum sulfate, and this isn't the right type of lime to grow your crystals. You really need potassium alum, and I actually had the best results using alum stones. So this is potassium alum stones. I bought these online, boiled them down to make that super saturated concentration, and this had by far the best results. So if you remember, I set out to try and recreate this beautiful amethyst geode. A geode forms when crystals develop within a cavity within the rock. So let's see my results. So the purple food colouring worked really well. Of course, they're completely different chemically, but you can see the same crystal formations have accumulated on the rough edges of the eggshell. A little bit's occurred inside as well, but it's mostly around the edge of the eggshell. And I guess that makes sense because the crystals can grow easier on the broken parts of the eggshell. Look at those beautiful purple crystals. Look really closely at the crystals on your eggshell. Do they all have the same shape and structure? And it's really impressive to see how the food colouring has actually become part of the crystals, and they're all this beautiful purplish colour. Of course, they're completely different chemically, but at least superficially, it does look a bit like that amethyst, doesn't it? Well, I actually tried a few other different variations to see what other crystals I could grow. I actually tried some reddish food colouring, but As the crystals have dried, they've turned brown. But still, this is quite pretty. For some reason, these crystals are much smaller. Perhaps this is the result of the different concentration of alum in that supersaturated solution. Or perhaps it's a result of the different textures on the eggshell. In any case, this particular one has almost filled the eggshell completely with the crystals and also formed around the edge. That brown colour is actually quite nice. They really sparkle beautifully. I also tried some blue food colouring, and this has resulted in these beautiful little blue crystals. In this one too, the crystals have grown inside the eggshell rather than round the edge. It's quite interesting, every single time it has a slightly different result and slightly different crystals. I also tried some different objects to see what crystals would grow on them. I tried this stem of some grapes, and I think this has worked really well. The rough texture of the stem was a brilliant surface for the crystals to grow. I didn't use any food colouring in this one, so all of these beautiful white sparkly little crystals have developed along the length of the stem. That's quite pretty. Lastly, I tried the stem of some tomatoes, and interestingly, this has had a completely different result. It doesn't have those masses of tiny crystals, but instead a few larger ones, particularly on the ends of the stem here. And I put a bit of black food colouring in this one. I think this is my favourite of all of the results. Look at these big crystals. They're so sparkly, just like diamonds. So, how did you get on? Were you able to grow crystals like mine? Remember, if you didn't have much success, try using potassium alum. That might have better results. If your crystals did grow, did you watch how they formed? I watched mine very carefully and saw the growth of the crystals over a few days. Did you then think about the geodes? How do the crystals grow in the cavities in the rocks? Well, clearly it's a completely different process because they're chemically completely different. But in essence, it's comparable and similar. Over hundreds of years, the mineral deposits slowly build up to form these beautiful amethyst crystals. This process can continue for thousands of years. Sometimes crystals in caves can grow to become absolutely enormous. These beautiful crystal caves were found recently in Mexico, and they're still being explored. Look at the size of these crystals. How many thousands of years do you think they took to form? I really hope you enjoyed growing your crystals. Remember, because your crystals are made out of alum, they will actually oxidize in air and turn white. So if you'd like to keep yours, get some clear nail polish and very carefully cover your whole crystal structure in a very thin coating of nail polish, and that should keep them safe and as beautiful as the day that you made them.
Okay, so there we go. That was our experiment from a couple weeks ago, grow your own geode. This time around, we didn't have any classrooms give it a try. I didn't get any little video clips or camera clips, which is okay. It is pretty much the end of the school year, and that alum that you needed was a little bit tricky to get your hands on. It was findable on Amazon, but you would have had to order it. So I'm not surprised. Hopefully this is something you can try over the summer. You can always come back to these videos. You can check them out and you can try these experiments at home. Remember though, the potassium alum works the best was the results that Stu found. So you should be able to find those available online. So we will not have a new experiment today because next week is our final World's Most Exciting Classroom event. And we're going to lose the bulk of our classrooms today. Today is the last school day for most classrooms. So you can definitely tune into next week's event from home. You can tune in online at the usual time, 9 o'clock Eastern, 2 o'clock in the UK. Today was a little bit different because we wanted to have Joe join us from Zambia earlier. And yeah, so you can still tune in at the usual time next week if you want to, or you can catch the recording. We are going to have a curiosity of the week because we do still have one more week. So let's take a look at last week's curiosity. Let's take a look at the answer.
Everyone, last week I asked you to try and identify this beautiful but very strange mineral. Could you work out what this is? Well, a lot of you sent in guesses and quite a few of you got it correct. It's known as pyrolusite. It's actually a form of manganese dioxide. It occurs in many different forms, but this incredible radial crystal structure is by far the most beautiful. It's been used by people for thousands of years. In fact, its name comes from the Greek pyro for fire and lucite meaning to wash. This is because this mineral was used to wash away or remove the colour from glass in ancient history. But its uses go way, way further back than that. For many thousands of years, blocks of pyrolusite were even found in the graves of Neanderthals. And it's thought these beautiful crystals, this interesting mineral, had a different ritualistic or perhaps even spiritual purpose for the Neanderthals. Well, regardless of these purposes, these beautiful radial crystals are some of the most striking of all mineral formations. Did you correctly identify this beautiful mineral as pyrolusite? This was a very difficult curiosity of the week, so well done if you correctly identified this.
All right, and we did have some classrooms that correctly identified it. We have to give a shout out to Mr. Cameron's class in Montreal. They are going to get the $50 Amazon gift card this week. So I will send a message to your teacher. And then we have one more curiosity of the week. So this one could be won by an individual student in Canada or the US, maybe in the UK, if you try this from home, or you might want to try and squeak in an answer before the school day ends today. So let's take a look at the brand new curiosity.
Welcome back, everyone. For this week's curiosity, I have this almost perfect sphere. Can you guess what this is and how it was formed? I'll give you a clue. It's not from an animal or a plant, but it's made out of stone, but it grows over time. Send in your best guess to classroom@darwin200.com for a chance to win an Amazon gift voucher prize. Join me next week to find out the answer. Good luck, and thank you for taking part.
Okay, there we go. That is our final curiosity of the week. It's a tricky one. Obviously, we don't want to leave you with something too easy. If you want to give that a try, think about it in the classroom, think about it at home, send in your answers to classroom at darwin200.com, classroom at darwin200.com. We will have one more Amazon gift card to dish out to a classroom. Next week, we are going to connect with the London Zoological Society. They have a collection of some really cool Darwin materials. They have some letters that Darwin wrote. They have a copy of the first edition of On the Origin of Species. So we're going to get to check out some of that really cool Darwin material from the UK. So with the London Zoological Society. So that's going to be pretty cool. Maybe we'll try to have one more special guest join us, one of our Darwin leaders. We haven't had a Darwin leader on with us for a little bit. Maybe we can get someone who was on the ship either in Cape Town or maybe Ascension to join us. And then, yeah, we'll be shutting things down after that. The ship will be sailing, making its way towards Falmouth. And then, yeah, we'll have a big celebration in Falmouth, and the ship will do a little jaunt around to London. We'll have another celebration in the UK. And maybe on one or both of those days, we'll do a short little live stream from the ship. We'll see what we can do. But we'll see you next week, same time, 9 o'clock Eastern, 2 o'clock in the UK. A shout out, as always, to our sponsors, supporters, and partners, without whom we wouldn't be sailing around the world, doing the world's most exciting classroom, bringing young conservationists to the various ports we visit to learn new skills, and then having our researchers like Mariana on board doing really cool research all over the world. So have a great week, everybody. We'll see you again next week, and we're going to sign off for now.